Canada, we need cultural sovereignty. We need cultural sovereignty. Um, this is something I've been thinking about for a very long time, something that I've written about before. But when I say cultural sovereignty, I'm speaking from the perspective of an author, from the perspective of someone who's creative, someone who's an artist, and like what that means as we extrapolate, that culture across our country, and then how we export that culture. We don't do a good job of that at all in Canada. And first of all, introductions. My name is Kern Carter. Uh, I am a five-time author. I write books for Penguin and Scholastic, and I have indie books and I have self-published books. So I have pretty much crossed the gamut of publishing, and I understand the industry fairly well. Um, but today, very specifically, I just want to talk about Canada, the country I'm from. Um, I'll be talking about Toronto, the city I'm from, very specifically as well, because first, let me tell you what kicked this off for me. Like, kind of reignited this thought process for me. And for me, I'm an author, I'm a writer. So typically, when I have something figured out, I would put it on paper. Like I write it, and I'll share it through my newsletter, Writers Are Superstars, or something like that. But when I'm working through thoughts, I like to share a video because I think it's just like it helped me as I'm talking. It helps me think through what I'm trying to get at. So I'm going to be rambling a lot in this video. Just expect that, because my thoughts aren't all the way fleshed out yet. But I think this is an important conversation, so I want to put this out because here's what reignited this for me. This whole cultural sovereignty thing. I went to an event yesterday at our public library. Toronto has like the most amazing library system, probably in North America. I definitely know we have the most libraries per square capita in North America. Like we do a really good job with our libraries. And there was an event yesterday where it was just an hour, and this Jamaican musician came in, and he was like playing music, folk Jamaican music, a little bit of reggae music, but he was also just talking about Jamaican culture. And here's the thing about Toronto. If you live in Toronto, first of all, you actually have a very different experience living in Toronto than you would living anywhere else in Canada, right? Like that's the first thing that you need to understand. Secondly, Jamaican culture, very specifically, is very much intertwined in Toronto culture. What I mean by that is the way we speak, the food we eat, the music we listen to, the way we dress. Like a lot of that comes from Jamaican culture. A lot. Here's the other thing, though. Here's the thing that makes Toronto such like a unique place is that I could say that maybe to lesser degrees, but or equal degrees. I could say that about Eastern European culture. I could say that about Asian culture, like South Asian, North Asian culture. Um, I could say that about Hispanic culture, right? Like South American culture. It's Toronto is a place, and I've traveled a little bit. Toronto's a place like no other, where you grow up and your best friend is Indian, your neighbor's from Thailand. You go to school with people who are Filipino. Like it's just normal. We don't look at that as anything like it's just part of how you grow up. You know what I mean? So and that is a experience that is very unique to Toronto, and not necessarily as unique to the rest of the country. So so again, I have to also I'm saying that to acknowledge my bias. I do live in Toronto, so like I'm speaking from a lens where from the privilege of of being able to grow up here and seeing and mingling with all these different cultures, right? So that's the perspective that I'm speaking from, and from the perspective of an author. And where I'm struggling is that as brilliant as we are as creators here in Canada, there is also a lack of cultural identity, which is it's weird to say that, but it's a lack of cultural identity, and there's a lack of systems and infrastructures in place to really um, internally support the culture that the creative culture, arts culture, and there's no system and architecture in place for us to export that culture because we don't even celebrate it internally. Here's what I mean. There was an article I read in Shush. It's a newsletter by Ken White, I believe his name is, and in it he showed this stat where Canadians, more than in any other country in the world, consume international. He used books, right? So we consume books internationally at a ridiculous rate compared to the rate that we consume domestic books from domestic authors. I think it's like 80% of the books that we consume are international rather than from our own authors. That is a wild stat because that first of all assumes that Canada does not have a lot of great authors, which is for the furthest thing from the truth. That is like we have so many great authors here and so many great writers here. I could list like a dozen off the top of my head. I won't even get into that. Um, so that's not the problem. It's not the fact that we don't have great authors, great literature. Um, but the same could be said for TV and film, right? The majority of TV and film that we consume is also American. Is also international. That's the majority of what we consume. So that's the majority of what influences us. That's the majority of what we celebrate. But how does that make sense when we have this mosaic of culture right here, especially in this city? How does that make any sense? How does it make sense that they just put out the list of top 10 highest selling books in Canada, and nine of them are American? How does that make any sense? How are all the top 10 shows on Netflix? None of them are Canadian. Like, and I'm talking about Canadian Netflix, and none of them are Canadian. How does that make any sense? How do all of our TV networks rarely the best show on the TV network is Canadian? And forget about best. The majority of the shows on the network are not Canadian for our major networks. How does that make sense when we genuinely have the talent? We're lacking what the what I how I phrase this, and I got this phrase from the Jamaican musician that I went to yesterday. The way he phrased it was like a lack of cultural um of cultural identity, essentially, right? Of cultural sovereignty was the word that he used. And I was like, wow, like that explains a lot of the way I've been thinking for the last couple years. Because I've written about this before. I've written about Canada needing to decenter the American gaze and really focus in on creating structures that support the talent that we have here. Not just support, celebrate, uplift, help us to thrive. You know, we have so many incredible Canadians who just leave from like Canadian exports that are gone. Like I Justin Bieber, Jim Carrey. My goodness, like I could go down the list of the Canadians that have not been able to fulfill their dream of doing what they want to do creatively and stay in the country. I could go down the list, you know, and it's sad, and but it's necessary because again, for some reason, we have not been able to create infrastructures to uplift and celebrate our own creatives. And this is something that has been going on since I was a child. I came to Canada when I was 6. I was born in Trinidad. I came to Canada when I was 6. And when I think about the books that we're reading in school, like most of them were from American authors. Like 95% of them were from American authors. I remember like two, you know, two books or something like that that were not American. And again, it's not because we don't have the talent. It's something else, and that something else is what I'm trying to work out in my mind right now. That something else is what I'm trying to figure out. I'm writing a full book that touches on this topic. It'll be out next spring, and I don't have a title yet, so I can't share the title with you. But this is important. This is something that we need to address. This is something that we need to fix because if 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 we're going to continue to not even if we're going to continue to export our talent without exporting the culture behind it, right? Like when I say export the culture, when people think of Canada from a creative perspective, what are they thinking of? Are they thinking of books? No, right? People don't even consider us when it comes to the like a history of literature. People don't consider us, right? They'll go um, British, Irish, American, Russian, right? They would not say Canadian. That doesn't even come up on the on their radar. When you think about film, Hollywood, French, right? Right? Before they even get to us. You see what I'm saying? Bollywood, and Bollywood's a newer invention, a newer innovation. So, and still Canada does not get credit. Again, doesn't mean we don't have amazing film directors, amazing actors, amazing, you know, like producers. No, that's not the case. So then, what is it that is not allowing us to be able to correctly identify? Hey, this is our strength. This is something we do well, and create structures that celebrate it. In the publishing world, it's a little bit frustrating because a lot of the publishing world in Toronto and Canada is government supported. Like a lot of the publishers are government supported, so that in itself, as grateful as I am for that, and not just the publishing world, sorry, the entire arts world, from publishing to film to anything, is government supported. And as grateful as I am for that, I think we should continue that in a way. I also feel like it's restrictive because um, it's not aligned for other structures in place, for other structures to be created that would actually really elevate those industries, elevate the creative industries, right? And then it's also restrictive because the government cannot possibly understand the full scope of what's happening creatively on the ground and then be able to build and be able to fund those things appropriately. They can't fund it appropriately. The government has a finite amount of funds, so they can't fund it appropriately, and not getting it funded appropriately leads to a whole bunch of other negative situations, negative outcomes, right? So we we need to just like grab hold of that, and create an identity sovereignly first, like domestically in Canada, where we're able to really uplift our creatives to the point where they could be stars, to the point where they could self-sustain in here, be stars, and then we need to figure out how to export that culture, not just like have the talent leave, but export the culture so that the Canadians can benefit, like the Canadian creators can benefit because the culture is being exported, not the talent. And if we export the culture, then people want to mimic it. People want to be curious by it, so they want to watch it. They want to read it. They want to be part of it, right? But we're not doing that. We're not doing that. We're just letting the talent go, and we're not creating infrastructure for the culture to build up stars. And that, anyway, that's my thought. Again, like I said, I told you I was going to rabble a little bit, so I apologize. I'm still formulating these thoughts in my mind to get them straight, but I will be right. Like I said, I have a book coming out in the spring that's going to touch on a lot of this, um, from different perspectives, from a more personal perspective. But I just want to get on here and talk about it. But yeah, let me know what you think. Follow, like, subscribe, which is the most important thing. Subscribe, and yeah, tell me what you think about this conversation.